There is an ongoing conflict that the world seems to be overlooking, and it's not the war in Ukraine. This conflict is occurring in Southeast Asia, specifically in Myanmar, where a coup d'etat occurred over 2 years ago. The military leaders took control of the government, leading to armed insurgencies and plunging the country into a state of civil war. The military in Myanmar has committed numerous crimes against humanity since the coup, yet the international community is not taking significant action to address the issue. Unlike the war in Ukraine, where other countries quickly provided support, there has been little to no action taken to support Myanmar during the 2 years of a legitimate military rule. This lack of action could be attributed to outside factors, as some countries have an interest in the military maintaining control, including China. China is strategically ignoring the situation in its neighboring country, and in this video, we will discuss how China is using the illegal coup to gain influence over Myanmar. In the early morning of February 1, 2021, the coup in Myanmar began, with the military arresting the country's government leaders. The leader of the NLD was taken during a raid, effectively removing the opposition. Once this obstacle was eliminated, the military moved quickly to the next step of their plan, which involved shutting down the internet, phone lines, and television networks. These actions are typical in staging a coup, as they prevent the population from knowing what is happening. By shutting down the internet, phone lines, and television networks, the Tatmadaw had the freedom to complete their grab for power. By the end of the day, the Tatmadaw had arrested 400 members of parliament, transferring all responsibility for legislation, administration, and the judiciary to the leader of the Tatmadaw, Leng, effectively making him the sole ruler of the country. Following the coup, the military commander established the State Administration Council, commonly known as a military junta, which is a government led by a military committee. Leng gathered some of his military colleagues around a table and formed an entirely new government. Shortly after the foundation of the committee, the military junta promised to hold an election within a year of the coup. However, as expected, the promised election never took place. The military junta has maintained control over Myanmar for over 2 years, during which time the Tatmadaw has cracked down on protesters and political opponents. As a result, the death toll from the military aggression has exceeded 2,300, according to a UN report. Additionally, 14,000 people have been arrested and 700,000 people have been displaced. It is important to note that these figures could be much higher. In response to these reports, the United Nations has accused the military junta of war crimes and crimes against humanity. The UN had repeatedly called on the international community to provide assistance to the people of Myanmar. The situation in Myanmar has only worsened over the 2 years of military rule, going from bad to worse and then to horrific. However, the reality is that the international community has done very little to push back against the military regime. While many countries have condemned the coup, the US has gone further by imposing sanctions on the junta and freezing $1 billion of their assets. However, apparently, this wasn't enough to stop the Tatmadaw from maintaining control. The Tatmadaw has a strong political and economic foothold in Myanmar, which helps the junta to maintain its grip on the country. They have the necessary resources to remain in power. However, there is another reason why they are still in control of Myanmar, and that is due to the support they receive from the CCP. The CCP has not openly condemned the military takeover in Myanmar. According to Chinese state media, the coup was simply a major cabinet reshuffle. However, what happened in Myanmar is a clear example of a coup d'etat, with a military junta arresting an entire government. The CCP wants to be cautious with this language and avoid angering the Tatmadaw, as China seeks to strengthen its relationship with its neighboring country. Irrespective of the military takeover in Myanmar, China remains determined to maintain its friendship with the country. This was made clear by the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi in April 2022. According to Wang Yi, China will continue to support Myanmar regardless of any political changes that may occur in the country. Essentially, this means that the Chinese Communist Party is indifferent to whether Myanmar is ruled by a democratic government or a military junta, as long as China's interests are secured. Myanmar is seen by China as an important partner in its neighboring diplomacy, as stated by Wang Yi. The significance of this position is evident from China's desire to enhance collaboration and engagement with Myanmar. China's support for its neighbor goes beyond mere rhetoric, as it has continued to supply the regime with military aid despite the absence of an internationally binding arms embargo on Myanmar. This implies that China is a significant military provider to the Tatmadaw, which enables the junta to suppress its adversaries. In essence, China is responsible for providing the weapons that the Tatmadaw employs to quell dissent within its own populace. By doing so, China has aided the Tatmadaw in retaining its authority. The reason behind China's unwavering support for the military junta is linked to its ambitious plans in Myanmar, which centers around the Belt and Road Initiative's China-Myanmar Economic Corridor. This economic corridor is a crucial element of China's wider geopolitical agenda, and its significance is such that it remains a priority for China, even in the aftermath of a military coup. China's commitment to the economic corridor is the primary motivation for its support of the current military regime in Myanmar. The China-Myanmar Economic Corridor involves extensive infrastructure development projects in Myanmar, with the objective of establishing a land-based route to the Indian Ocean through China's neighboring country. This strategic initiative presents a massive economic opportunity for China, since 80% of the world's maritime trade passes through the Indian Ocean. However, the economic benefits are not the only motivation behind this initiative. It is also a critical geopolitical necessity for China, given its reliance on trade as a major component of its economy. China's economy is heavily dependent on imports and exports, and any disruption in trade could potentially lead to an economic collapse. Hence, safeguarding China's trade routes is crucial, and the China-Myanmar Economic Corridor is a crucial element of China's overall strategy in achieving this goal. China is heavily reliant on the Strait of Malacca, a narrow 40-mile wide waterway in Southeast Asia, for approximately 60% of its trade. This reliance on a single trade route makes China particularly vulnerable, and the Strait of Malacca has become one of China's biggest security risks. In a worst-case scenario, such as a conflict within the United States, the Strait of Malacca would be a significant point of vulnerability for China. It would likely become a prime target for the adversary, given its critical importance to China's economy. The blockade of the Strait of Malacca would prove to be catastrophic for China, since its over-reliance on this trade route could lead to a significant disruption in its supply chain, thereby jeopardizing its economy. China's dependence on 60% of its trade, including crucial items like fossil fuels and food, poses a significant security risk, which President Xi Jinping is undoubtedly aware of. Fortunately, there is a potential solution to this problem. China could reduce its reliance on these routes by diversifying its trade options. One option is to utilize the China-Myanmar Economic Corridor, which would allow China to broaden its trade beyond the Malacca Strait. Of course, achieving this goal is easier said than done, as it would require a substantial amount of investment in infrastructure. Despite the challenge, investing billions of dollars into such projects could prove to be worthwhile. By constructing seaports, railways, and pipelines in Myanmar, China aims to create an alternative to the Malacca Strait as a crucial trade route. If successful, Myanmar could serve as China's primary land-sea trade corridor in the future. However, the implications of these projects are significant for Myanmar's population. China will likely attempt to expand its influence in neighboring countries to realize its economic corridor goals. Regrettably, China's approach involves supporting the military regime, which could be detrimental to Myanmar. China remains one of the Tatmadaw's few international partners, and by supporting the regime in Myanmar, China has established a favorable position with its neighbor. The Tatmadaw is expected to cooperate with China's plans due to the lack of alternative options. Since no other country is likely to provide military and economic support to the Tatmadaw, China hopes to utilize this leverage to gain the necessary power to construct the economic corridor. But what of Myanmar and its citizens? What can the rest of the world do to help? Comment your thoughts below. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications to stay up to date with our latest uploads.